Welcome to In the Envelope, a podcast from Backstage, the #1 resource for actors and talent seekers. I am your host, Jack Smart, awards editor at Backstage, and I'm here to guide you through every aspect of the entertainment industry with the help of some of your favorite stars. These intimate, inspirational conversations with today's most award-worthy film, television, and theater artists provide you, dear listener, advice on how to live the creative life, personal stories of success and failure alike, and maybe, just maybe, a tantalizing glimpse in the envelope.
The more variety and the more options you can bring your collaborators, the more an asset you are to have on set or in the recording booth. It's very frustrating when an actor comes in and they have decided this is how this line should be said.
Welcome, listeners, to another episode of In the Envelope. Welcome back to another special Tuesday episode. This episode is extra special indeed, not just because of the guest we just heard, who, by the way, is Raphael Bob-Waksberg, who is the creator of Netflix's Bojack Horseman, among other things. But I have also asked to join me today, Jamie Muffett. Jamie, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? I'm not sure I can match your level of enthusiasm, but I'll try.
Okay,
I'm gonna try.
That's totally fair. How have you been holding up? How's things been going?
Good. Yeah, fine.
Other than keeping up with In the Envelope episodes at maybe a higher rate than you're used to, how are you in general? Pretty good.
Voiceover work has been steady, actually, maybe even busier than usual in some areas.
Right.
But so in terms of work-wise, things are pretty good. I can't complain. Obviously, the world is in a very strange place right now, so that has to be navigated, of course. But yeah, how about you?
Yes, in general, there's still lots of ups and downs, but I think in general, it has been nice to have this podcast up and going regularly, and kind of just to pick the brains of these very fascinating, very accomplished artists and ask how they're dealing with these uncertain times, particularly, when it comes to their creative process, because for some, their creative process is unaffected. I think for more often, it's their creative process has had to be adapted. I think that's kind of true for all of us to an extent.
Yeah, I think it doesn't matter what industry you're in to some extent. I mean, we're all trying to sort of figure out how we're going to deal with all this stuff and how we maintain our sanity. And
completely.
I mean, usually when you're able to go to set, you're able to leave your home, you can escape the day-to-day of whatever's going on in your life. But we're sort of sat here having to face everything every day.
Just you and a microphone, just me and a microphone.
Right, yeah.
In very separate places. You mentioned voiceover, which is the theme of today's episode, I would say.
Yeah.
Is it not?
It is. And I think we have a couple of episodes coming up where that is also a theme, and it's sort of an ongoing theme for us right now.
Totally.
Primarily because that is the area of the entertainment industry that is still up and running.
Completely.
And still doing well.
Completely. This podcast is expanding into we're obviously still focusing on acting and talking to actors and creators, but we're also doing these deep dive episodes like today's into different parts of the industry, and we've had to kind of tweak and adjust that strategy as this crisis has kind of affected the industry, and as you said, affected voiceover in many ways. And so it's helpful to talk to somebody like Raphael Bob-Waksberg, who's a bit of a voiceover expert and animation, I'm going to say animation pioneer.
Yeah.
And the creator of one of my favorite TV shows of all time, Bojack Horseman.
Yeah.
And I don't want to quiz you, but you just listened to the interview. What should listeners listen out for?
There were a few things that really struck a chord with me, and one of them was how to remain, or the importance of remaining flexible as a voice talent with line delivery, with approach to your character, and not necessarily having an ironclad, linear approach to everything. Sometimes you can go into a booth with one expectation and end up voicing something completely different. I thought that was interesting, and offering the editor a lot of options afterwards as well with a variation of lines. I thought that was pretty good and really practical. That's what happens.
Absolutely, just like on camera acting.
Yeah.
In fact, I would say this interview is great for anyone who is not involved in voiceover at all and is just a regular actor, also a regular writer, because there's plenty of thoughts on screenwriting, as he's a major writer and author. So yeah, I would say if you're an actor who is maybe intrigued by voiceover, is maybe kind of drawn to it right now, given the state of the industry, our future voiceover deep dives like this one are going to be your guide to getting that started.
Yeah, definitely. There's a huge amount to learn from these. One thing I do want to throw in there real quick before we wrap this up is that as voice actors, sometimes we have a tendency to blame the script if something isn't going right. And it was nice to have a writer's perspective on that, because that is not necessarily how, what we should be doing. We should be working with the tools that we are given. So I thought that was a particularly good takeaway.
Ain't that the truth? Yeah. Well, great. So let's get to it. This is a supersized interview. So today's is a supersized episode. And that's because we couldn't cut anything. It's all really, really great. So
yeah, it is.
Buckle up. And Jamie, thanks for joining us. We will talk again very soon.
My pleasure.
Let's take a quick break and then get to this interview with Raphael Bob-Waksberg.
Hello. This is Jamie, the producer of the podcast, and I just want to take some time to tell you about the sister podcast to In the Envelope, which is VO School. This is a podcast that I produce and host, and it is devoted entirely to voiceover. So if you're looking to get into the voiceover industry, you should check it out. That's VO School, found on iTunes, Stitcher, all the usual places, and it's hosted by me. Each episode covers a different subject, and we go through the business, the craft, the marketing, the blood, sweat and tears that is creating a voiceover career. So check us out, the VO School podcast, available now.
Raphael Bob-Waksberg is a showrunner, comedian, author, voice actor, and pioneer of animated series. He teamed up with illustrator and production designer Lisa Hannawalt to create and produce Netflix's Bojack Horseman, a tragicomic satire about a Hollywood has-been horse. Raphael is also the creator of the Amazon animated series Undone and producer of Netflix's Tuca and Birdie. Here's our in-depth interview with Raphael Bob-Waksberg. Okay, great. Hi, Raphael.
Hi, how are you? What's new? What's the gossip?
So wait, where are you? You sound good. Do you have like a full-blown studio or?
No, I definitely don't. I'm glad to hear I sound good. I'm just on my laptop in the guest room of my home.
Okay.
Which has turned into my office.
Have you done like press since this all started?
A little, not a lot.
Uh-huh.
But
no podcasts?
No podcasts. No, this is my first home studio podcast, I guess you could say. I've got a very, very makeshift home studio going here. Mm-hmm. It's just best, it's the best we can do. We're doing the best we can. Yes.
This is the In the Envelope podcast with Backstage. I know you just spoke to Backstage recently. Mm-hmm. But we are all about the craft and career advice for artists. And
sure.
It's a weird thing to start an interview this way but that's the sign of the times. What is your life like? How has your life changed? What's been going on in the last month?
How has my life? What's going on in the last month?
Is everything just totally normal? Nothing's changed?
No, I can't think of I know I'm kicking myself because I know later I'm going to think of something that has changed, but top of mind, everything has been totally normal. No, things are different. I'm really not leaving my house except to buy groceries or walk my dog. I've been I was going to say working from home, although I've really barely been working. This has not been the most productive quarantine for me. I don't know if other people are having more productive quarantines.
Oh, it's run the gamut. It seems some people are completely catatonic, not working, and some people are like productivity machines right now.
Yeah, I would say I am not getting a lot done, but I don't feel too bad about it. I've been allowing
Okay.
myself to slow down. I'm thinking of this as a regenerating time as far as my ideas and productivity goes. That maybe I'll come out of this with an eagerness to get back to work. But
Right.
I've been working very hard for the last 7-8 years, and I think it's very natural to have periods of productivity and periods of non-productivity. And so I am using this forced time off and forgiving myself for not being as productive as maybe others are.
Well, that's actually great advice. Yeah, for those listening who are maybe feeling the pressure of having to create content right now. That pressure that pressure is optional, maybe.
For some, I mean, I'm very fortunate in that I do not have immediate financial concerns or reasons where I feel like I need to work other than my own, let's say, guilt or sense of self-identity as a writer. But I know many others are not as fortunate. So I don't want to be glib and say, just relax, take it easy. What's the problem?
Very true. Totally.
And of course, I'm very lucky that my line of work is one that I can work from home if I chose to, and if I could muster the enthusiasm for it, I could spend the day writing. Whereas I know many other people are not so fortunate.
Sure. Well, and the fascinating thing about Hollywood right now is, I mean, I think I was reading the other day, like, the writing part of the production process, the earliest parts of that process is still well underway. If anything, there might be more people participating in that right now. It's just that the production part can't happen. So if and when we are all allowed to go back to our normal lives and Hollywood kind of kicks up again, do you think there's just going to be this floodgate of ideas that are ready to be filmed and ready to go?
Yeah, they don't need me to write stuff.
They don't need you
writing things. I hope so. I mean, I don't think there's going to be a moment where like the gates open, though. I do think it's going to be a slow, gradual rebuilding of some things that are possible and other things that take longer to be possible. So it's not going to be like flipping a switch, but I do think if people have ideas and they're excited to be writing, I don't think that is a fruitless pursuit at the moment. I think it is worth assuming that, yes, if you write something, one day someone will want to make it.
Well, so take me back to the very beginning. I'd love to hear about the germ that started all of the initial seeds of this career. Was writing always the goal?
No. I mean, well, how far to the beginning are we going? Like, what do you mean by begin? When you say always the goal,
were you ever like bit by the performing arts bug or the Hollywood bug?
Yeah, I mean, I did theater in middle school and high school, and I was always a bit of a class clown, and I liked to perform. I feel like I never had a good sense of what my future was going to be. Although I think if you ask people who knew me, I think most of them might tell you that this was always in the cards for me to some extent. I think other people saw more direction in me than I saw for myself. I mean, I remember feeling very lost and confused as to what I was supposed to be doing at various stages in my young adult life.
Sure.
But I do feel like I landed in the right place. I was a playwriting major in college.
Okay.
I remember when I was in high school, actually, my idol was David Letterman. I wanted to be a late night talk show host when I grew up.
Okay.
Although I am so ill-equipped for that line of work. Now I don't know what I was thinking, because I don't enjoy making small talk with people. And that's basically all a talk show host is. So I'm not sure. I think I enjoyed the bits. I liked
okay.
that when I was a kid, the talk show hosts that I was fan of, like David Letterman, like Conan O'Brien, like they didn't take it too seriously. There's kind of a damn the man energy behind them, and I liked that rebellious spirit. I think more than I liked the particular job that they were doing. But
Gotcha.
But then I majored in theater in college, and I was also in a sketch comedy group. And I remember at that point feeling very strongly that theater should be serious and emotional, and sketch comedy should be unambiguously funny and punchline oriented. And I didn't want any of my sketch comedy stuff in my plays, and I didn't want any of my serious theatrical stuff in my comedy. And then later, I guess when I began my TV writing career, I started to play with the idea of maybe combining those two impulses, and that's, I guess, where Bojack Horseman comes in.
Interesting. That's so interesting. You compartmentalized the two. Was that just because those were your perceptions of theater and of
I think so.
sketch?
I think I was kind of snobby too, as I remember, seeing plays or reading plays and feeling like this is not a play, this is sketch comedy. As both a playwright and a sketch comedian, this offends me because it's not quite as funny as sketch comedy,
Gotcha.
but it's not as hard hitting as theater, and they're calling it theater, and I don't think that is fair to either discipline. Now I don't think I would care as much, but yes, in college and in the few years after college, I definitely felt like that distinction was important.
Right. It's not like at the time you were thinking, well, these are eventually going to coincide and create something for television.
Yeah, and I think also when you are young, it's helpful to kind of create definitions for yourself. I think I think that is a part of the maturing process, or the development process as a brain in flux, is to kind of define things and create distinctions or borders around things, even if those borders end up shifting. I think it is maybe helpful for a young writer.
Sort of like learning the rules and then learning enough about the rules to be able to break them.
I think so. I guess I'm thinking of like, when you're a baby or when you're first learning language and you see an animal and you say cow, and your parents say, no, that's not a cow, that's a sheep. But for you, you're just kind of learning what a cow is. And a cow is a four-legged animal with fur, and then, or, doggy maybe. And then as you continue to evolve, you learn to discover the distinctions between animals. And I think sometimes, you create new distinctions, but also things can blur in some ways. Or, that thing can't be a table because it doesn't have four legs. Oh, well, some tables only have one leg. This is a thing we figure out as we develop.
That's just a natural part of human development, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Excellent. And so, okay, Letterman, Conan, the playwriting, the sketch, what were the other kind of influences, especially maybe in that formative college era?
That's a lot of things.
It certainly is.
I was certainly, definitely a student of sketch comedy. And I would watch a lot of it, improv too. And I was also a student of theater, and I loved reading old plays and going to see plays. I was writing a lot. I had a blog at the time that I think was really helpful for me as far as like creating a discipline around writing. That I used to write in my blog every day, even if I didn't feel like it, and that kind of I think helped me develop like what are ways to keep this fresh and interesting for me. Are there different formats to blog entries that I could play around with when I get bored, or when my audience gets bored? I think it was really instructive to kind of see which blog entries people seemed to like and comment and on, and which ones kind of fell flat. I think, and that kind of goes along with my sketch experience too. I think performing for a live audience really honed my sense of humor, my sensibility. I think that was really helpful.
So was your writing always, or was it always trying to be kind of the outward facing? It was not a private blog. The point of it was to share things publicly, right?
Yeah, but I think there is a sort of anonymity in writing for the public as well. And then I remember I would write stuff in my live journal that I would never tell my friends. That I wouldn't tell people personally, even though I knew that my friends were reading the live journal. Like it was easier it created a bit of distance, even if that distance was fictional. And I certainly had one or two Harriet the Spy moments where the wrong person discovered what I was writing in my live journal, and I had to apologize or just avoid that person for the rest of my life. But I do think having the distance of the computer screen helped me take bigger risks than I would have if I thought that I was writing directly, writing a letter to a person specifically. It was helpful to kind of imagine that the audience on the internet was just the masses, which I think, like I said, allowed me to take bigger risks and allowed me to be more intimate and personal than I think I would have been otherwise. And then also discovering that intimate personal stuff really connected with people. That I would write stuff thinking like, oh, I'm the only person who feels this way. This is such a weird thing to admit. And then other people would say, oh my God, I feel that way. I didn't know other people did.
So interesting. Yeah. And was the regularity a part of it too? I almost want to ask, like, what is your approach to disciplining yourself? When you say you wanted to write every day, was that an organic desire or something that you maybe sometimes had to force yourself to do?
Yeah, well, it actually was my friend Ben had a blog in college also, and he started this thing where he said, I'm going to write every day, and I challenge all my friends to write every day too, for the rest of the year. And then whoever does it, whoever can last till the end of the year gets a prize. And so it started as this very external challenge because I wanted that prize, or I wanted I don't even know I wanted the prize, I wanted the bragging rights. Yes. But then looking back, I think that discipline really made me a better writer. And I've said this before, that I think if you went back and read that live journal, although I wouldn't recommend anyone do that, I think you can kind of see my development happen in real time and see me become the writer that I still am, that I kind of developed the tools and I figured out what my voice was, even if it was, an early rudimentary version of that voice.
And is it just true that you have to, again, with the public thing, you have to put it out there, even if it's vulnerable, even if it's scary, because because the feedback is helpful, right?
I think so. I mean, you don't have to always put it out there. I mean, you can just write, if I think the public aspect of it made it easier for me to motivate. I think if I was just writing in a diary on my own, or a journal on my own, I don't think I would have the discipline to write every day. But I think knowing that people were waiting for my entries, or that people would notice if I didn't for a day, I think that's what made me do it at that time, at least. I think since then I've become a little bit better at self-disciplining, but not super good at it, as we discussed at the beginning of this conversation.
Well, right. A pandemic will come and change that, right? Like,
it might. Although for some it isn't. I mean, I think everyone's reacting differently.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah, discipline is not something you learn and then it's automatic forever. Like, you kind of relearn it. Yeah.
But I think it's helpful. And so even if it is like, making a game for yourself or giving yourself a challenge, I think the routine of it can be more helpful than the end goal of it, right? If your goal is like, okay, by the end of this week, I'm going to write an amazing thing. Okay, Monday I didn't write anything amazing. Tuesday I didn't write anything amazing. And then Friday comes around like, oh, I didn't do it. But if your goal is like, I'm going to write for an hour every day, that is something you can do if you're not as results oriented. Gotcha. I heard a story once, and I don't remember where this came from. I think maybe I think I heard this from Dan Harmon, probably said this in an interview or something. He told the story about like a pottery class. And this probably isn't even true. It's just a story people tell, but I find it very helpful. There's a pottery class. And on the first day, the teacher divided the class in half and said, okay, the half on the left, you guys have the whole semester to make the perfect vase. And you could spend as much time you like on it. You can make as many versions of you as you like. But you have to make the best vase you can by the end of the semester. And then to the other half, the right half, okay, you guys have to make a vase every day. It can be as bad as you want, but you have to do it every day. And then at the end of the semester, they put all the best vases up, and there was like a blind vote on what the best vases were, and all the best vases came from the half that made them every day. That it was the people who got the routine down and got better at it. It's like if you're trying to learn guitar, an important part of that process is for your fingers to get calloused and thick so the strings don't hurt your fingers anymore. And you can only do that by doing it over and over and over again. Right. And I think writing is the same way, that like part of being a writer is just getting it in your bones, getting the muscle memory down, just doing it. And I think we're so often as writers afraid of writing something that is less than perfect. Yes. And I think that fear paralyzes us. And I'm a big fan of writing less than perfect things. I think that's so important, and allowing yourself to do that, and then editing and refining those things and revising those things to get as close to perfect as you can make them.
Totally.
But I think you have to not be afraid.
Yes. Of creating bad work, because there is no such thing as creating perfect work from the get-go.
Right. There's no perfect. Especially in a field as subjective as writing for television. Right. You're never going to please everybody anyway. It's not like you're going to write a thing and a scientist is going to measure it and decide, yes, it is 100% pure and correct. And then you get, a little prize. It's impossible. So all you're doing is just doing the best you can to articulate the mess of emotions and fears and hopes and the tangle of corners that exists within your soul. So just do the best you can.
Totally. That's beautiful. Yes.
Well,
totally.
I try.
Because I do think, maybe societally or just the way that we think about art, we are very results oriented, or I don't know. I keep thinking about, maybe it's because we're in this golden age of TV. Speaking specifically about TV, there's so much great TV out there that it's almost overwhelming for someone who's like, I would like to maybe write for TV. Usually the appetite of that person is to watch all of the best TV. And when you do that, do you think it sort of becomes overwhelming? Like, I would like to get into TV. How on earth do I become as good as that person, or as that show and that show and that show?
I do think, I think it's analogous to, the Instagram effect of like looking at people with gorgeous bodies on beautiful vacations, eating perfect meals, and going, I don't live like that. Why, it's hard not to compare. But of course, like an Instagram photo, every TV show is the culmination and the accumulation of years of collaboration and work, and is perfectly, not perfectly, but is tirelessly designed and created to present the best face.
Right.
But that, it all started from someone looking at a blank page on a laptop going, how do I write good? Nobody knows. Like I I've written 6 seasons of a TV show with great help from an incredible staff of writers and other collaborators. But I still feel like I don't know what I'm doing, I've kind of freed myself of the expectation that I ever will.
Okay.
I think we're all just kind of fumbling around in the dark and putting piles of mud on top of other piles of mud, and then gradually refining it to look like something.
Is freeing yourself of the expectations, is that a skill? Is that something you need to practice?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think it only comes with the experience of making something that you are proud of and realizing you have no idea how you made it and that you cannot replicate it. And yet somehow you do. I feel very lucky that I think my experience on Bojack was a very positive one for me. And it didn't fill me with any sort of confidence other than knowing that I will never get that sort of confidence, and that itself is a kind of confidence. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like every season of Bojack, I remember this last season was very difficult for me. And just the breaking of the season, I had a real challenge with, and I wasn't sure how we were going to do it. And I went into my friend Lisa's office, and Lisa is the producer on the show and the designer. She does all the art for the show. The whole look of the show is from her, and we have offices right next to each other when we are not sheltered in place. That is. And I went into her office and I lied down on the couch and I said, Lisa, I don't think I can do it this year. I don't remember how to do it. It's never felt this hopeless to me. I think this season is going to be a disaster. And I don't know what to do. And Lisa looked at me and she said, you come into my office at the beginning of every season and you give me this exact same monologue. And I had no memory of doing that.
Oh, funny.
But I think it's, I found that in some ways encouraging.
Sure.
In other ways, kind of terrifying. But in some ways, on my more optimistic days, I tend to look at that as a funny story.
Right.
About how giving birth, perhaps we forget how hard it is when we decide we want to do it again.
Very similar, yes.
Totally. As I understand it. I've also never given birth, and I don't imagine I ever will. But I also don't imagine I will ever write another episode of television, so who knows? I've been surprised before.
Right. So how do I write good? That phrase you used, which I think is so brilliant. That really is just a part of the writing process. Probably early in the part of every writing process, even 6 seasons into a show, or maybe especially 6 seasons into a show.
Yeah, and I think the best answer is stop asking that question and just start writing.
Okay. That's so interesting to hear that you really struggled with the last season, because of course I want to ask about Bojack and like, I don't know, there's this thing with film, TV, and theater, with any art, I suppose, where there's almost like a post-project hangover or like a post-show blues. And that must be especially true for a years-long process like Bojack. So like, I'd love to hear about the experience of creating specifically the final season, and then the process of letting go and saying goodbye. Was it as emotional for you?
Let's talk about that first. I think that's actually a little more interesting, and I haven't talked about that as much. I would say, I mean, there's certainly a bittersweetness to it, but I think it's the blues have not been as heavy as I expected them to be. I think I had an expectation that once this was all over, it would really hit me pretty hard. And I think because it was such a long process to end it, like we were working on this last season for like about a year and a half, I think, from when we first started writing it to when the final episodes dropped. I had so much time within that to go through all the stages of grief, from denial and bargaining and anger and sadness and acceptance. And making the season was so difficult. By the end, I mostly just felt and still feel relief. I feel like we did it. We pulled it off. And I think when you are making a show, especially a years long show, but I think this is true of anything, any movie, any play, any artistic thing that you're doing. But I guess even more so a TV show that you're putting out as you're making it. There is always this like sense of like you are building an airplane as you are taking off and flying it in the air. And then, at a certain point you think, oh, have I put landing gear on this plane? Do I know how to land this thing? I have to build this as we are now landing. I have to create the landing strip and screw on the wheels onto this thing. And so there is a stress of like, can I pull this off? Can we do this without crashing into the side of a mountain? And so, feeling ultimately like, yes, we landed the plane and now I have this show and it is a complete thing. That feels good. And I take a lot of pride in that. And that, on some days I miss the process and I miss the people. I don't miss the stress of the responsibility of feeling like, oh, this, especially on a show that I feel very lucky that people have responded to in a really positive, powerful way.
Sure.
I think that comes with a great deal of responsibility and feeling of like, well, we can't let those people down. Right. And then I always felt every season, I felt like, well, this is the season that everyone's going to hate. Like we've gone too far with people still liking the show. Now people are going to realize that we let them down. And I feel like that didn't really happen broadly. I mean, certainly there are people who prefer some seasons over other seasons, but I think broadly it feels like, no, the people who liked the show liked it all the way through. And we have a nice little package now that is the show. And so I think the relief that we like got away with it kind of outpaces any lingering sadness or longing.
Gotcha.
And especially now that we're dealing with this whole new universe, there's a little bit of relief that we ended before having to deal with all of this and trying to figure out, is this a part of the show now, or how do we deal with this? How do we work through this? There's a cleanness to not having to. Although I do regret that I do not have the opportunity now to continue giving jobs to a lot of people that I'm sure would love to be working. So that's a mixed bag. But otherwise, I generally feel very positive about ending the show when and how we did.
Yes, the timing was good. And I mean, speaking personally as a fan, I hear where you're coming from with the responsibility that you feel, because I had very high expectations for your final season, for how you guys were going to stick the landing, frankly, and you still exceeded those expectations.
Oh, thank you. That's very nice of you to say.
It's probably, I mean, it's no longer on the air. So I've always said I've said for years, it's my favorite show on the air. And
well, it's still, look, I don't know how you count Netflix shows, because it's
true.
It's still, people are still discovering it for the first time.
Yes.
And people are still watching it. And, I would encourage you and anyone else, when asked what your favorite currently airing TV shows are, to mention Bojack.
I can still say that.
You can definitely still say that. I think as long as we are still eligible for awards and year-end lists, I think we still count as a TV show.
Yes, totally. Yeah, and we really are in the age of streaming content, when on the air means a completely different thing. And
right.
I think Bojack is pretty great quarantine viewing. So
I would say so. Yeah. Why not?
Why not? Yeah. I would love to ask too, one more question about Bojack before I want to ask you about Undone as well.
Okay,
but
great.
What was the initial inspiration for Bojack, and how has it changed? Especially how has it changed? Because for all TV shows, the initial seed and the finale are pretty different things. But I imagine, was this intended to be first and foremost, or more so, a Hollywood satire at the beginning?
Versus what?
Versus, well, I would characterize it, again, speaking as a fan, but characterizing it as much more of a like deep dive character study with 5 or more really, really fleshed out people that, yes, there are cartoons, but to me, they feel like people in my life.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it was always meant to be both. And I think we're very lucky that we got 6 seasons, that we had the opportunity to continue to go deeper with all these characters every season.
Gotcha.
And to really unpack who these people are and how they work in the world. But I remember the pitch, when I brought it into Netflix back in I guess it was like right around Thanksgiving 2013, when I said, I want this to be a show that when it starts, people think that it's like a typical animated sitcom, and by the end of the first season, it's become more of like a serialized dramedy, along the lines of like a Girls or even a Mad Men. So the goal with the first season was to trick people, which I've since kind of gone back and forth of whether or not that's a good goal for a TV show to have. But that was the idea. Was yes, I want this show to be deeper than people give it credit for at first. I want it to sneak up on people and surprise people. So by the end of the season, you're going, wait, I actually feel for these characters. How did that happen? And I wanted to go slow, like boiling a frog, that before you know it, you're invested. And I think part of that was I enjoyed the game of it. And then also part of it was I wasn't sure, because it was an animated show, if people would take these characters seriously or if we had to trick them. Like I still wonder, if we had come out in the first episode, if it had been as heavy and emotional as the show ended up getting, if people would have been into that right away, or if they needed that adjustment period. And I'm not quite sure about the answer to that question, honestly. And I think one thing that Bojack has done, at least for me, and the way I see it, as far as how my work is viewed, is I think it has given animated shows that come after Bojack more room to not be funny and goofy at first. And so certainly, when we made Undone, we were banking on the expectation that people wouldn't write off an animated show as just being goofy right away. And we didn't have to teach that lesson again, that we could start it from more of a dramedy place and know that there was an audience for that because of the work that I felt I had done on Bojack to bridge that divide.
Very cool. Very cool. So about Undone, could you explain for maybe listeners who don't know the style of animation and how the filming of that works?
Sure. So Undone is a show that I co-created with Kate Purdy, who is a longtime Bojack writer, and it's on Amazon. And it's a dramedy about a young woman who gets in a car accident, and when she wakes up from her coma, she discovers that her perception of time has been altered, I guess is the best way to describe a very difficult to describe TV show.
Totally. Yes.
And that now her father, who died, over a dozen years earlier, is appearing before her and telling her that because she has come close to death, she has now transcended some sort of barrier, and she can learn and develop skills to control time. And he's going to train her so that she might be able to go back in time and stop him from being murdered. And the tension of the first season, at least, is she doesn't know if she has actually gained these powers and discovered this new way of viewing the universe, a la The Matrix, or if she is just losing her mind, a la A Beautiful Mind. And that tension is kind of what the show is about. But the way it is made is rotoscoped animation, which is, if people are familiar with Waking Life or A Scanner Darkly, or a series of E-Trade commercials that came out a few years ago, basically we shoot the actors doing a scene, and then these incredible artists and animators, tracing is not quite the right word, but they go over every frame of the show, and they draw the characters based on our actors' performances. So when you're watching it, it has this very eerie effect of feeling very lifelike, but also in some ways cartoony. And it I think, as far as the content of the show, I think the form complements it in a really interesting way. That you, like our protagonist Alma, feel like you're kind of between worlds and you don't know what is real and what is not real.
Totally. So that is you're saying the actors provide a lot of the kind of original, the material of what it looks like and what it sounds like and what it feels like, because they're filmed as just bare bones, just the actors at first.
Yeah, so we do it like, or I should say we did season 1, because the technology is constantly changing in really exciting ways. And so even now we're talking about doing season 2 in slightly different ways. But in season 1, we shot it, almost like you're at like an acting conservatory and you're just doing a scene for your classmates, like very bare bones, like these 2 blocks are a bench, and you're holding a steering wheel and it's a car, and then all that is drawn around the performances. And so it really meant the actors could really just focus on the other actors and their performances and the way they acted with them. And there wasn't a lot of, hair and makeup. There was a little bit, but there wasn't a lot of lighting setups. Like it was a very quick, a lot of turnarounds, in very fast. It was all done in one studio space, just boom, 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 boom. Not a lot of location moves. And you could really kind of focus on the content of the scene. And so I think it was really fun for them. And it was really cool for us that we got these incredible actors. And then I think for the animators, it's a really fun challenge too, because there are a lot of choices made about which lines on the face need to be drawn, and how do you suggest this smile, without drawing every single wrinkle. And you can catch all these little details. So like our animators now, like they know our actors' faces better than their own spouses, probably. like they, they can tell you when Rosa Salazar is about to start smiling because they know exactly how her eye twitches. It's really fascinating.
Yeah. Wow.
And you see it in the show, like you see this incredible detail. And in some ways it looks more real than if we just shot it with cameras. Like there's almost, because the artists are choosing which details to highlight, it's really powerful. It's really interesting.
It is stunning. And it's such an exercise in like, I want to ask you, what do you learn from actors? This is true of, I guess I could ask this about Undone and Bojack. Like, do they ever influence your writing? But also, have you grown as an artist or as a thinker because of working with actors?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think the biggest thing I have learned is to trust actors more. And then I think when you're first starting as a writer or director, I think there's an impulse to feel like you see something in your head and you want it to be just like that. And you want to use your actors as like little Lego pieces that you can kind of move around in your make-believe world. And that I think, first of all, actors don't like that because they want to feel like they are adding something to the process. But also, I think your work becomes better the more people you allow to collaborate with you. And so, I mean, that's true on every step of the process. And I've been so lucky to have such talented collaborators. I think Bojack would not be the show it was if not for the incredible writers that I worked with. But that's also true of the animators and the character designers and all of the actors. And that, once you stop hearing, the one specific line read in your head and you allow actors to come in with their own interpretation, sometimes you can be surprised and delighted by what they pull out of the script and what they add to it.
Yeah.
And there are lines in Bojack that I remember thinking, well, this is a placeholder. And then hearing at the table read, Will Arnett or one of our other actors just find new corners of that line, and you go, oh no, that's perfect. Like this is really
amazing.
Cool what this actor is doing with this line. And I think that wouldn't be possible if you had too strict of an idea of how every scene was supposed to go. So I think that's the main thing I've learned from actors is that it sounds so basic, that actors are talented and they are smart. If you allow them to be, and I think it's important to figure out what they're good at and write towards that, and give them room to find things and give them room to surprise you. and build the time in, and allow that to happen.
I love that idea that it's not a rewrite of, it's not like they're rewriting a line of yours, but they are reading it in a way that you didn't expect. Even just placing an emphasis on a different word, it expands your mind, right? About like where the character could go even.
Yes. And I've found, and so I'm not saying actors should throw the script out and just improvise. I'm saying, good actors can find different corners of written lines, and you take two good actors and put them in a scene, and they can do the scene 5 different ways without changing a word of dialogue if they're good.
Right. Totally. Well, and I know you've been asked a lot about writing advice, but I would actually like to, we are Backstage, so we do have an emphasis on all parts of the biz, but mostly acting, early career actors. Do you have advice for someone who's starting out in acting, maybe especially who wants to get involved in voiceover?
Yes. I mean, I would say the biggest piece of advice I can give is train yourself to come up with different good interpretations of the line and the scene. That you're not trying to hone in on a specific target necessarily. I think for some projects there's a very specific thing you want to hit. But I think you want to allow yourself to be flexible. And I think part of that is just, honing your instincts and your ability to be flexible on the day, so that even if you have an idea of what the scene means, if the director comes in and says it's actually about this, that you can very quickly pivot and give that performance. But I think also part of it is preparation and looking at the script beforehand and thinking, okay, my initial instinct is that it should go like this. And what is the best version of my first instinct? But also let's take a step back and think, are there other ways this scene could play? Are there different lines that could have that emphasis, or different words in this sentence? And I think the more variety and the more options you can bring your collaborators, the more an asset you are to have on set or in the recording booth. And then I think it's very frustrating when an actor comes in and they have decided this is how this line should be said, either consciously or subconsciously. And even as you try to massage them in certain directions or give them notes, they can't go more than 5 centimeters off of their read of the line. And I think there's also, sometimes a danger in the other thing of just thoughtlessly throwing out random emphases on different words that no human would ever say, which is not always helpful, but sometimes that can be helpful to find things that work. And there have been actors who come in who give me some real wild takes, but then through that, they land on something really interesting that we never would have found otherwise. So I think, first of all, yes, you have to think about different ways to attack a scene. And then also you have to, leave your ego at the door and trust that I or the director or the editor wants you to look good. So we're not going to let you look stupid. Like if you give us something that is totally messy and it doesn't work for the scene, we're going to cut it out. You don't have to worry about that.
Gotcha.
If we think your messy take is the best for the scene, we'll put it in and trust us.
Right. It goes back to that thing of, it's not going to be perfect. Just put it out there and see what works.
Yes. But I think also part of that is doing the work beforehand. And I think there is, a feeling with some actors that maybe even particularly in voiceover, because you don't have to memorize anything. You're just coming in, the script is right there. You don't even have to look at the script beforehand. And I think the more successful actors, at least, especially for ones who are just starting out, because I think there are actors who are so experienced that they can just come in and read it cold and give you 5 different reads, boom, 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 boom. But I think if you are just starting out and you're trying to show that you are a cut above perhaps other people who are just starting out, I think preparation and coming in flexible and knowing that you might throw out all your preparation immediately, but having thought about the character and the lines beforehand, I think is going to pay dividends on your time in the booth or on set.
Yeah. It's funny because we obviously ask a lot about audition advice on this podcast, and that what you just said echoes the advice for auditions of over prepare. And when you are in the room, it is super key to then kind of drop everything and just really have the ability to be flexible. And I didn't realize that that's just true of the voiceover booth audition, or if it's
I think that tracks to everything. I mean, that's true of writing also, or like pitching a show. Is that like, I had ideas going into season 1 that's like, this is what the show is. And then when I realized those ideas weren't panning out, I had to pivot and come up with other stuff. So I absolutely think, over prepare and then be flexible is like the best advice for anybody working in this business.
Cool. In any medium, including writing.
Any medium, any discipline.
Yeah. Amazing. Are there also, maybe on the flip side of that, are there misconceptions for someone who's starting out in the industry, acting, writing, anything in the arts? Is there something that you find people believe that is wrong that you wish more people knew?
That's a good question. I've given my good advice, and I guess my misconception I would want to get rid of is people thinking they don't have to do my good advice. All the stuff I just said. I think the misconception as far as acting goes that I kind of ran into over and over again was the feeling that I was looking for a correct take. Like there was a target that I was trying to hit, and that every adjustment that I wanted was towards that one goal. And so I would always tell actors coming in that we're looking for variety. We want to have options in the editing booth. Give us as many good takes as you can that are all wildly different from each other. Because I might feel like this is the correct thing right now, but then when looking at my options and looking at like the other actor's performance, I might feel like, I want something bigger here, or I want something smaller here. And so I think the feeling, and I understand the instinct of like, I'm trying to go towards the target. I'm trying to get the exact right thing and then we'll move on. I think is not always helpful. And the truth is like, I want something like this and I want something like that. And I want something like this and I want something like that.
Yeah.
And the more options you can give the editors, the better position they'll be in.
That's great advice. Okay, amazing. We have all these silly backstagey questions that I would love to ask you, slightly tailored. I mean, usually we're asking these of actors, but do you must have a SAG card. Do you remember how you got your SAG card?
Yes. I was on an episode of Children's Hospital. And I got that because John Stern, who was a producer on Children's Hospital, I had met with to develop I'd worked on a different project with, like a pilot presentation for Sony that ended up going nowhere. But I think Rob Corddry, when they were casting the show, they really wanted to fill up the show with funny people. And so even though it was just one line, I think John Stern was kind of like looking through his Rolodex, like, this is a funny guy. Let's bring him in. And I'd done sketch comedy, and so I was a little bit of a performer, but not really. Once I moved to LA, I kind of saw myself as being on the writing track. So I was really delighted to get this call to come do one line on this show, and it was terrifying for me. And it was it was my first day on like a real set, and I felt totally lost. And I made the exact mistake that I just warned against, that I had one line and I kind of decided what my character was going to be and how I was going to do it. And I get on set and the director goes, so I think your character's kind of like this, and like something totally different. And so I had to very quickly just drop everything I had rehearsed and said, okay, I guess I'm this guy now.
That's great. That's great. And was that like, I have a newfound appreciation for on-camera actors?
Yes. Yeah,
I mean, with one line, yeah.
It might have been two lines or something, but it was very. And then, because there's so much other stuff you don't think about, right? Is that like when you get the script and you're like practicing in your apartment, you're like, okay, I get this. But then when you get there and the camera's there and the lights are there and everybody's looking at you, like it is a whole different thing. And there's no way to practice for that other than doing it. And so I think the first time it is like terrifying. It's like, oh, this is a brand new thing. And I've seen it happen. Because we've brought in non-actors for Bojack and Undone sometimes if we want like a cameo or someone come in, and you see people who are very well put together and are public figures even who know how to talk and know how to put words together. And as soon as you like put a microphone in front of them, you get very flustered and you forget how to say a sentence like a real person.
Totally.
And it's very overwhelming.
Yeah. You got to talk like a human. On Bojack Horseman, you got to talk like a regular human, even if you're playing a horse or a cat.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. What is one performance that every actor should see and why?
Ooh, that is a great question.
Film, TV, theater, anything. Comedy.
One performance. Oh, I should have prepared an answer to this because I know as soon as we hang up, I'm like, oh, I should have said this. I should have said that. I'm drawing such a blank right now. You really put me on the spot.
I know. This one always throws people for a loop, and we could totally come back to it.
I mean, I'll say the first thing that comes to mind is maybe this is a cheat, but I'll say Will Arnett in BoJack Horseman.
Yes,
particularly the episode "Free Churro," which is just one monologue. It's actually two monologues that Will gives over the course of the whole episode. I think if you are a voice actor, I think it is really instructive to listen to what he does and how he modifies and modulates his voice. And I think he's such a pro when it comes to hitting jokes and finding the comedy in lines, but he's also an incredibly emotional actor. And he gives a very precise technical performance in that episode. And so I think if you are interested in voice acting, I think it is a performance worth studying. Amazing.
Actually, going off of that, like, if you're a voiceover actor looking to study voice, like great voice acting, how exactly should you do that? Is it like listening to that episode rather than watching the visuals, maybe?
Yeah, I actually think that's really helpful, is if you close your eyes and you listen to what's happening. And actually, when we make the show, we do a radio play first. Before any of it is drawn or storyboarded or animated, we edit the whole thing together, just the voices, and we listen to it. And the goal is, does it work as a radio play? Because if it doesn't work as a radio play, no amount of animation is going to save it.
Okay.
And so it's and then, of course, the animation adds so much to it. But I think it's important. Yeah. Think about how you communicate stuff with just your voice without the benefit of physicality. And I think it's worth thinking about, like, what are certain physical cues that you don't have, and how do you do that with your voice? Like, how do you give something air quotes with your voice, right? How do you wink at somebody with your voice? How do you leer at somebody? How do you play different lines in different ways? And think about what are the counterintuitive ways to read this line, and can you discover some interesting friction there? Can you play against what the text of the line is saying and find another element to it? That's something I'm really fond of asking actors to do too, is that, trust the line to communicate what it communicated to you when you just read it, and then think, is there something else I can add to it? Sometimes it's enough to just play what the line is saying. It's distracting if you try to throw too many curveballs on top of it. Yeah. But sometimes it can be interesting to go, okay, well, this is a very sad line, and it reads as very sad. So what if instead of playing it as very sad, I tried to lighten it or tried to be funny with it? Would that help the sadness come through even more?
Yeah.
So I think
just
if you can find
what that does.
To see what it does, I think find those ironies. But I definitely think listening rather than watching is really helpful. And I think Even with live action stuff too, closing your eyes or, listening to a scene and then looking at the scene and thinking, what did I get from just the voice? And was it everything? And if not, how would I have improved this voice to give us what the actor's giving with their physicality?
Oh my gosh, that's terrific advice for voiceover actors. Thank you. I also feel like just these days, just post-quarantine life, voiceover acting is very much a thing right now. It's very much something that a lot of people starting at the very, very beginning of the process of becoming a voice talent. Like, I think a lot of people might be doing that right now. I know a lot of home studios are being built as we speak.
Well, I think animation is a thing that seems to be maybe the least disrupted, although albeit still very disrupted of all the things that are being made right now. So I certainly think, yes, you're going to see more and more actors get into it in the immediate future. But also, I think generally before this, I feel like animation was having a really good time. I feel like there are exciting things happening in animation. There are new kinds of stories happening in animation that haven't been told before. And so I think a lot of actors, it would behoove them to have that skill set in their tool belt.
Definitely.
Even if they think of themselves as primarily live action actors.
Or dramatic actors. Yeah. Because like you were saying about sort of tricking audiences with Bojack, like I think more and more these days it's accepted that animation is not necessarily all Bugs Bunny. It's not all silliness. There's a capacity for real dramatic pathos, even if there are animated animals involved.
I would say, I think another good skill set for any actor is, I would say, practice with like bad copy and ask yourself, how do I make this good? Because I think there's a frustrating instinct I see sometimes with actors where they have trouble with a line and their instinct is like, we have to change this line. We have to, this isn't funny. This isn't good. This isn't working. I have to say something different. Whereas I think the better actors have trouble with something and they ask, like, what is happening here? What am I not understanding? Or they think about, what can I do with this to make this work for me? And I think that's where really interesting discoveries are made. Right. I think a lot of times, like, a lot of thought has gone into that script that you are so blithely dismissing, if I can say, in defense of writers. And not always. Sometimes it was, 3 o'clock in the morning, we just had to get something down. But a lot of times, that line that you might want to change might be a load-bearing line for something that happens later in the story.
Sure.
And so I think it is, or, you might just not be allowed to change something. And so I think it is a really good skill, because I don't think a good instinct is then, okay, well, I guess I'm just going to say this bad line and they'll see how bad it is. I don't think that's helpful.
That's not realistic.
Or then you just get a bad performance and then you're in the scene acting badly. Or they change it to a less interesting line that is maybe easier for you, which I don't think should be your goal as an actor. I think if you can see this line as a challenge and go, okay, I'm not getting this. Maybe it is bad, but what life can I bring to it? Or is there a way for me to make this good? I think that's a really interesting challenge and really helpful. Because there have been times where I have written jokes because it was 3 o'clock in the morning. I go, we just have to have something in this scene. And then we do the table read. And then Paul F. Tompkins knocks it out of the park. And you go, oh, good, we're in good hands. He saved this. And this could have been really bad under a less talented actor, but the good actor made it work. So I don't believe there is any line bad enough that a good actor can't save. So I would, if your instinct is this line needs to be changed, I would put the challenge back on you and think, how can I save this line? How can I make this feel natural or funny without, shitting on the scene or distracting from what the point of the scene is.
Right.
And sometimes that you can ask. You can say, I am having trouble with this. Help me understand what this line is supposed to be doing. If you come at it, from a place of respect, the writer or director will be happy to talk you through it, or maybe even change the line if they agree with you that it's not sounding natural. But I think if you come at it from a place of disrespect and it's not going to end well for anybody.
No. Sure. I love that. That's pure gold. The idea that there's no line bad enough. if the actor can see it as a challenge, then what a great opportunity to grow as an actor.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
And to be fair, I will say to writers listening that you should be egoless about your own work. And if you see an actor struggling with your line, whether they are being gracious or not, it does not behoove you to punish them by making them say it, and then you have a bad performance on your show. Right. It is important for you to be gracious with them and try to help them, either by trying to explain what you are going for, or allowing them to riff around if you think that would be helpful. Sure. But I think, on both sides, we can kind of dig our heels in, and that is not helpful. It's a collaboration. It should be a collaboration.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's excellent. That's so excellent. Okay, last question. What is your number one piece of advice for your younger self? If you could go back in time, something you wish you'd known.
Don't worry so much.
Okay.
Yes.
That's great advice, yes.
I mean, that's advice that I think me of 10 years from now could probably tell myself now, too.
Oh, sure.
I mean, I guess a little bit of worrying is good, but not so much. I wouldn't say don't worry at all. I'd say worry a healthy amount. Worry as far as it's productive, but then, maybe, keep normal business hours for your worrying. Try not to worry when you don't need to be worrying.
Wait, I love that, because so often, don't worry about it implies, a complete lack of worry? That's not a thing.
Yeah.
You have to have the right amount.
Yeah, I think there are people who worry more than is helpful, and then there are people who worry not enough. And I think, unfortunately, we're all bad at figuring out what kind of people we are. And I think, unfortunately, if you are the kind of person who thinks that you are worrying too much, you might not be worrying enough. And if you're the kind of person who thinks you're not worrying enough, you're probably the person who's worrying too much.
Yes.
So that's advice I would give to me specifically, is that I probably didn't need to worry quite so much. But that's not necessarily one-size-fits-all advice for everybody. See your physician. Ask your doctor if worrying is right for you.
Yes. Yes. Get the right prescription for the right amount of worry, for sure.
And I do think that the success of Bojack, I think in some ways comes from not necessarily worrying, but paying attention to detail. And I think there's definitely a lot of detail on Bojack that I wouldn't want to dissuade myself from caring about. I think sweating the small stuff is good sometimes, but it doesn't always mean work. But also, it's like the thing that the alcoholics say, right? About knowing the difference between what you have control over and what you don't have control over. I think that is a very important skill.
Interesting. Don't sweat the small stuff, and some of it is small stuff rather than, and it's all small stuff.
Yeah, but I also think one way in which I was very lucky, and I would encourage other people to seek this out if they can, is to find collaborators who you trust, so you don't have to sweat all the small stuff yourself. But I think the success of all of my shows, I would say, comes from empowering people to add their own little bit of magic to the sauce, because it's not something that I could have done all myself. Sure. And so I think you need to find people that you trust and then actually trust them. And then know that you don't have to worry about everything, because you have other people worrying about this specific thing or that specific thing or this specific thing.
Right. Gosh, that's excellent advice. Raphael, thank you.
Thank you. This was such a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us from your quote unquote home studio.
My pleasure. I appreciate it.
Have a good one.
You too. Take care.
In the Envelope is recorded at Lotus Productions and Hyperbolic Audio in New York City, and Soundbox LA, Mark Grouse Studios, and Buzzies in Los Angeles. Thanks as always to our producer extraordinaire, Jamie Muffett, and to the team at Backstage, Samantha Sherlock, Mark Stinson, Caitlin Watkins, and of course, Kasey Howe. Visit Backstage.com, and don't forget, you can subscribe to Backstage by using the code ENVELOPE at checkout for a free trial. That's right, 100% free. For more exclusive content, join us on Facebook and Twitter at In the Envelope, and subscribe, share, and leave a comment. Who would you like us to interview next? Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time for another glimpse in the envelope.